If I was an aspiring writer producer, and you had to give me advice to start out now, well, like, what would I need to do to get where you are now? Well, what would I need? What are my first steps?
Community, either building it online or building it with other people in the industry or people who are aspiring to get into the industry in your local town.
So singer-songwriters,
Artists? Producers, artists, beat makers, any group of creatives where you can develop your skills and collaborate. And it doesn't need to be physically in the same place. It can be online, but you need to enter a community because the odds of you developing those skills fully and getting access to the world on your own is very low. I mean, the number one thing in the industry that's going to lead you to where you want to go, which is success, is ultimately network. And you know, you need to have those skills to open doors, but you also are gonna, once you have X amount of skill, your friendships and professional relationships are going to open many more doors than your actual skill.
I see. So having musical talent and knowledge and skills related to music producing is important, but also having interpersonal abilities and skills in order to network and push yourself further in the industry, you would say is just as important, right?
I would say it's, in the beginning, probably developing your musical skills is the most important thing. But as soon as you achieve some sort of professional level in any of the domains, whether it's just on writing, just on producing, just on mixing, any one of those domains, you achieve a professional level, I think at that very moment, your networking abilities immediately become more important than your musical abilities.
Interesting. So then, now I've developed my skills to a certain level. I'm in South Africa and I'm interested in the K-pop industry. What would be the immediate steps that I would need to take in order to give myself a shot at coming here?
You know, it's a lower hanging fruit than you think. What's great with if you're coming from a smaller market is getting access to the major companies. Your Sony, your Universal, your Warner is going to be somewhat easier in that territory. Working with some local artists to build a portfolio is going to be a little bit easier in your local territory. There's just less competition. You don't have giant American, British songwriter producers actively pursuing the South African market. So you're going to be able to get access to building up a professional portfolio in your local market. And once you do that, and you don't need much, I like to say, if you have 3 songs that are banging, especially if they're released, your doors are open for you. If you have 3 incredible demos that aren't released, but you have good relationships, the doors will open for you. Both of these ways are just as viable, but you either need an industry person to vouch for you and then be able to show some of your work and have the other person on the other side of the table agree with that, or your music has been approved by the world, even if it's just your local market, and then you go to a new market with it. But just getting some proof of you know what you're doing, and then rolling with that and networking, and that bar is so much lower than people think. If you have it's you don't even need to have millions of streams. If you have a few 100,000 streams, the million is more than you need.
Streams on
Spotify or SoundCloud.
Okay.
It's if you have something to show traction that you can make things move, you can exponentially grow that with network.
And then from there on, like let's say now you've done that, you've got 500,000 streams, for example. Now I want to come to Korea. I can start reaching out to smaller or mid-sized companies or labels to see if anybody would be interested in potentially producing with me, or I would need to get a publisher first that I would have the connections.
Well, that's where if you have the social proof and you've gone the route of the internet loves your music and are really like you have a cult following on the internet, that can be the odds of one of those cult followers being a producer or songwriter in Korea is fairly high with even a fairly small amount of followers. They might not even follow you, but they'll listen to your music when it shows up, and it's easier to actually catch them than you think. You accidentally run into people that have heard your stuff quite frequently. And on the other side of that, okay, let's say you don't have that online cult following. Well, then yes, you're going to need a management or a publisher that has the connection, because if you send a blind email and they have not heard of you, no matter how good your demos are, they're not opening it.
Yeah, because I'm sure they get a bunch of that.
Yeah, that's why the two routes are like they're not, the path forward from them is not completely the same.
Yeah.
But both viable ways to go.
But the point is then, as you mentioned earlier, is like create an online presence and put your music out into the world.
If you're from a very small territory, yes, that's how I do it. If you live in a major city that has a music presence, Berlin, Stockholm, London for Europe, maybe even Paris and Barcelona, and then for America, Nashville, LA, New York, even Miami these days has become quite the hub, or Atlanta. Then from there, you'll be able to have, there's people in your town that you can access, and you don't necessarily need to go the online way because the network exists in your town. If you're from any of those cities, you're good to go. You can network without having to go online. If you're not from those cities, I would advise going online.
Okay. And how many writers or producers that are foreign like yourself are there currently that you are aware of in Korea that have achieved success to a level similar to yours?
It is a lot less than you think. Most are still doing the back and forth between their home country and here. And the ones who are successful are doing it very frequently. The really successful ones that haven't moved here are still coming every other month.
So you're saying you need to commit.
You have to commit. There is, I would say, the people that are living here who are foreigners who are crushing it. I mean, there's I can count them all on my two hands.
Really?
It's, and I'm not sure why this is. People, I mean, I understand for the Europeans because Europeans don't necessarily like leaving their home country, I've noticed. And the Americans are much happier to leave and try and go explore new places. But Americans are also just really happy to get on planes. So I mean, they're happy to do the back and forth. So it's just ended up in one of those things where not a lot of us end up moving.
Yeah.
I ended up moving because I always wanted to live in Asia, and I fell in love with the place, and especially when I started working on the ATEEZ stuff more, and they really brought me in as like a family member, and so I was like, I have community here, and my old publisher had started his own publishing company, and I was like, dude, I'm with you all the way, man. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's make this thing big. So I got on the plane, brought my suitcases, and moved here. But that was also because of just a set of circumstances where I was like, let's do it. Also, living in Sweden as a young person is not the most exciting thing.
It's a lot of darkness in winter and a lot of not going out because it's goddamn cold.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? Like everyone is. I think this is not just Sweden. This is Scandinavia. This is Germany. Yeah. Everybody wants to be so grown up at a very, very early age. Well, you'll notice like if you're 30 in America versus 30 in potato Europe, the 30-year-old American is considered young. The 30-year-old in that part of Europe is considered an old man.
Now we know what they called you, old white dude.
Right? It's all the Germans
Europe.
and Swedes hating, right?
Yeah.
But so the perception is very different. So you're going out in your 30s, and depending on where you are, that's seen as pathetic or you're still happening, right?
Wow.
And being in a country where being 30 meant, what do you mean you don't have a child and a wife yet?
Yeah.
What do you mean you're still renting? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Versus coming here where of course you live in a shoebox. But what do you mean? Of course you're supposed to be out. What else are you gonna do?
Yeah.
I was just like, this is I want stuff happening. And stuff happens here. Sweden and I think most of Europe is a slower life, which can be great later on.
For some people.
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah.
But for me and what I want to do, it's just like, no, I want action.
But also your career kind of requires you to be in the thick of things, to be in the action, to be in one of, not Asia, but the world's most bustling cities.
Absolutely.
Whether it be art, fashion, music, beauty. Korea is at the forefront of all of those industries, and if you want to succeed in any one of those, you would need to be there. It's great making music from Sweden, but you're not gonna make things happen. You're sitting at home in Gothenburg,
right? Yeah.
You need to be here in Seoul.
Oh yeah. Well, back to what we were saying earlier. The number one skill to develop once you've achieved a professional level is your network.
Yeah.
And the network there is. It's still somewhat of a hub. Yeah. But compared to here, you
can't eat Korean barbecue in Sweden with the right people.
But Seoul is a tier 1 city. I think some people try and claim Stockholm as a tier 1 city, but that just isn't true. Not a chance. But so especially when you're in your younger years and you need to develop your network, getting to a tier 1 city is the best thing you can do. I'll say this: my quality of life, and especially if I'm gonna not to get too deep into like personal finances, but my net worth has shot up dramatically since moving here. Yeah. The opportunities, the side quests, the ability to be part of projects in a more meaningful way opens financial avenues in a way that didn't exist while being while working from abroad.
Yeah. All right, good one. If you enjoyed that clip, here's a full-length pod right over here. Go ahead, smash that click.